Pegaso Z102BS Cupula Berlinetta por ENASA, number 0121, 1952. A space oddity Pegaso Z102 first drive of surreal Spanish supercoupe. Driving the wild Pegaso Z102. The one-off 1952 Pegaso Z102 Berlinetta ENASA Cupula looks like a spaceship yet was built by a company more used to making trucks. Octane was allowed an exclusive drive, or should that be flight? Words Martin van der Zee. Photography David de Jong. The keys are in my pocket, but I don't feel the urge to get behind the wheel and drive off. Not yet. I just gaze at it in awe, like a little boy who is seeing a real fighter jet or a fire engine for the first time. My eyes slowly follow every line, every detail. My brain is trying to reconcile the logic of a traditional motor car with the unpredictability of this bright yellow phenomenon's design. Is it beautiful? Yes, it is. And no, it isn't. But it is definitely breathtaking. Who on earth penned this 1952 Pegaso Z102 Berlinetta ENASA Cupula? Yes, Berlinetta with one T-. It's Spanish. Pablo Picasso? Henry Moore? Was it made on Earth at all? In fact, the exaggeratedly curved lines of this plexiglass-domed yellow spaceship with its red wall landing gear, all seemingly inspired by 1950s UFO hype, were drawn at a factory. Even more shocking, it was a factory that made trucks and buses. The Spanish ENASA, Empresa Nacional de Autocamiones, was formed in 1945 when Hispano-Suiza was nationalized. ENASA was led by the Spanish industrial engineer Wilfredo Ricart, who came from Alfa Romeo. The Barcelona-based company manufactured trucks, buses and military vehicles under the Pegaso brand, named after Pegasus, the wind horse in Greek mythology. To boost its prestige, ENASA introduced a sports car, the Pegaso Z102, in 1951. The government was backing the company financially and Spain wanted to prove that it still counted as a nation in post-war Europe. For the same reason, Pegaso's new sports cars were usually fitted with dramatic coachwork by famous coach builders such as Touring and Saatchick. You wouldn't be blamed for supposing that the Berlinetta Cupula has a touring superleggera feel to it, and, while there is some truth behind that, the story is confusing and sometimes even unresolved. Photographer David de Jong reminds me that we have work to do. I press down the large chrome ball next to the driver's door, after which the door pops out slightly for it to be opened. Sitting in the light green interior, I feel low down but quite comfortable. The dash looks conventional, even slightly Italian, but it's the only conventional thing about the cockpit. Vanity boxes are fitted left and right below the dashboard and there's a metal toolbox near the passenger footwell. Opening the door window presents a challenge. Instead of a handle, two thin vertical rods are connected to the glass and these have to be clicked out of small holders, then moved horizontally and pushed outwards to open the window. Whoever dreamed up that? A more immediate problem is finding the starter button. It's the left one, says Ron van Dongen, chief engineer at the Ulmen Museum, pointing at a ivory-colored piano keys on the dash. Trusting him, I turn the ignition key and press the button, after which a sudden loud bang scares the hell out of me. But somehow I must have done the right thing because there's now a hoarse and uncivilized but roughly consistent engine sound. Despite the Pegaso being a left hooker, the dog-like 5-speed gearbox works the other way round. First gear and reverse are off to the right, while 4 and 5 are on the left. For someone brought up on the continent, it's like driving a right-hand drive car with a manual box. To achieve better balance and stability, the Pegaso has a rear transaxle, with the gearbox behind the differential. Getting the car into gear isn't easy, however, not least because the box doesn't have synchro mesh. First gear engages okay, but the golf club-like lever doesn't want to move into second, and double declutching doesn't work either. My ego flies out of the window. There must be another way. First, let's see if we can solve the design mystery. When Pegaso started producing sports cars, there was a close cooperation between Wilfredo Ricart and Carrozzeria Touring's CEO and chief designer Carlo Cibianchi Androloni. The 1952 Pegaso brochures show artist impressions by Turing's designer Federico Formenti of cars that resembled the Cupula but were never manufactured. Formenti also designed the equally UFO-inspired Disco Volante by Alfa Romeo, incidentally. 1952 Pegaso Z102 Berlinetta ENASA Cupula interior. Clockwise from above. Wild enough interior for you? Logo is based on Pegasus, the winged stallion of Greek mythology, vanity boxes and tool case tucked into door pillars. One of the joint projects between Pegaso and Turing was the Thrill Berlinetta, 2Ts, also designed in 1952 and presented a year later. The Thrill and the Cupula could easily be from the same family, and there are two unproven theories about this. One is that the Thrill project was executed by Turing and that the Cupula design was left to ENASA as a work experience project. The second is that the sketches of the Thrill were left at Pegaso after one of Androloni's visits and were used as a starting point for the Cupula's design. Neither theory is particularly credible, but there must have been some sort of mutual inspiration. The most reliable conclusion is probably that the Berlinetta ENASA Cupula was a Turing-inspired design by Formenti, with a Turing-inspired type of body construction as well, based on a tubular chassis. Astonishingly, however, the Cupula's body is made of steel rather than aluminium, apart from the bonnet. The origin of its design is not the only myth surrounding the Cupula. It is said that there was a second Cupula, or rather a first. This car, painted cream and with a light green interior, was presented at the 1952 Paris Motor Show and in London shortly afterwards. It differed from the yellow one in having the door opening buttons positioned higher and the rear dome lower down. The most credible suggestion is that this car was a prototype that was partly or completely scrapped after the show and/or was used as the basis of the yellow Cupula, which made its debut at the World Motor Show in New York in February 1953. Therefore, this car can be regarded as the only Berlinetta Cupula ever built. You have to consider this as being a freshly delivered, new car that still has to be run in. The mechanics of the gear lever and connecting rods are a bit too tight and we still need to loosen them up, says Ron van Ongen. So I give it another go, following his instructions, and it works. Welcome back, Ego. Now I am able to feel the power of the Pegaso as it rapidly accelerates, still boasting that raw sound of its 2.8-liter, 250 bhp Diesmodromic 32-valve V8. It had a supercharger back in 1953. But that was experimental. The clutch is heavy, the steering is heavy, the gear changes are heavy. This is a really tough car to drive. The experience is greatly at odds with the Pegaso's elegant looks, despite the sporty exhaust pipes mounted on each side. Would you believe that the later 3.2-liter Pegaso Z102 was the fastest production car on the planet in its day? Even faster than a Ferrari? Apparently so. Since I'm driving on a circuit-like private road in the grounds of the Ullmann Company, actually the Dutch Toyota and Lexus importer, where the Ullmann Museum also used to be before it moved to The Hague in 2010, there is some room to play. The car's handling feels very tricky, to put it mildly, even trickier than a Porsche in that the rear doesn't break away but simply jumps out, not helped by the narrowness of the track. The suspension can be adjusted, but it's clear that driving this car quickly demands a lot of skill. Above and facing page Back to the Future, 1953 style, almost nothing about the Pegaso is conventional, including its color. Although the Pegaso sports cars were very fast, they never really succeeded in competition. Worth mentioning, however, is that in 1953 a Pegaso broke the speed record set by a Jaguar XK120 at Jabke, Belgium. Pegasos were also extremely expensive and ENASA lost a lot of money on them. Despite an attempt to produce a second model, the Z103, fewer than 90 sports cars were built, and around 1958 the factory switched back to only making commercial vehicles. In 1990 ENASA was taken over by Iveco, and soon afterwards the Pegaso name was dropped. For our static photographs, we've moved the car to Rotterdam, and stepped back in time. The Groothandelsgebouw, it means Wholesale Trading Center, was built in 1953, the same year as the Pegaso was first presented. One of the icons of the post-war reconstruction of Rotterdam, a city that lost its heart during a 1940 bombing raid, it was designed by local architects Hugh Maskant and Willem van Tijen as a kind of wholesale beehive and was inspired by the merchandise mart in Chicago. Located next to Rotterdam's Central Station, it has been a listed building since 1991. 1953 was also the year that the Pegaso was bought by its first owner, Rafael Trujillo, President of the Dominican Republic from 1930 until 1961. He purchased it straight from the stand at the New York City Automobile Show in April 1953, 2 months after the car had first been in New York for the World Motorsports Show at Madison Square Garden. In between, the Pegaso went on display at the 3rd Annual Autorama in Hartford, Connecticut, and made the C-120-mile journey from New York under its own steam on public roads. Quickly, too, its driver was fined for speeding at 130 miles per hour. An event that made the newspapers. During Rafael Trujillo's ownership, the Pegaso got its nickname of El Dominicano. Trujillo was assassinated in 1961 and the Dominican government then confiscated the car. A while later it was sold and passed through the hands of several owners, being restored and painted silver with a red interior during the 1970s. Then, in the mid-80s, German collector Peter Kos bought it for his Rosso Bianco museum. Kos presented the car at Pebble Beach in 1994, at Retrimmable in 1996, and in Schwitzingen, Germany, in 2005. In 2006 the Dutch Lowen Museum acquired the Rosso Bianco collection, including the Pegaso, but it wasn't put on display because its 1970s restoration didn't meet the museum's high standards. Only in 2009 was a project initiated to fully restore the Pegaso to its original form as it was presented in New York in 1953, an undertaking that would take 6 years to complete and would involve the USA, Italy and the Netherlands. Patrick Huiberts of the family-owned Classic Restorations Holland recalls, "It was one of our most specialized jobs. Many parts had to be made from scratch, such as the boot handle, the rooftop lights and even the rubber pedal pads. The plexiglass dome also had to be remanufactured, using a specially made mold. It was like putting together pieces of a large puzzle." But the hard work paid off when the restored Pegaso won Best of Show at Amelia Island this year. And yes, the red wall tires are original. Back in The Hague, Evert Lowen tells me, "This is the most beautiful Pegaso ever made, and having it in our collection means a lot to me. It is so modern for its day, even more modern than a contemporary Ferrari. Imagine parking a Chevrolet next to it." He is spot on. Seeing this car must have made a lifelong impression on people. As is proven when Lowen continues, "A man came up to me at Amelia. He told me that his father sent him to an English public school, where he felt quite lonely. Every month his father mailed him some car magazines and, in Popular Mechanics, he found a picture of this Pegaso. So he cut it out and stuck it underneath the lid of his writing desk, and every time he felt a little homesick, he sneaked a look at the picture and it made him feel happy again. Now, after all these years, he saw the car for real and cried from joy. It not only made his day, it made his life."